For the shamans, the invisible world is where everything is happening. Early on in my academic life, I slowly began to understand that we don't have a healthcare system, we have a disease care system. And the idea of the shamans is not to heal cancer or heart disease or dementia, but to prevent them. I had contact with an indigenous group that were prophecy keepers. What they were doing was working with the luminous energy field in that organizes your health as well as your experiences in the world. And I can do a little demo with you if you want to have an experience of this. Why don't you put your cup down?
Yeah.
And I'm going to come over to where you are.
Okay.
There's an effortless quality to being in the flow of your own journey. The minute you begin to participate with those natural dynamics, then you step into the divine place and to say, hey, you are also a creator. It's an act of courage, but life will keep bringing you to it until you say yes one day. And I think that that's what we can all do. We're all called to do that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know Thyself podcast. Our guest today is a medical anthropologist and psychologist who many years ago left the halls of academia to study alternative healing shamanic practices in the Amazon and Andes. And since then, for the past decade, he's been supporting people by being a bridge between neuroscience, psychology, and healing mind, body, spirit, coming into full, total alignment. Alberto Villoldo, thank you for being here.
So good to be with you.
I would love to start and set the stage a bit with some of your background and a bit of your story. I'm just curious, as you were kind of steeped in academia, what really pulled you to explore the shamanic path more?
I was born in Cuba, raised in Cuba till I was 9. And right before we left, there was war. There was a rebellion going on. And we lived near the airport. They were bombing the airport. And I was underneath the bed for nights and nights at a time. And what I didn't realize is that part of myself has stayed underneath that bed for 40 years. And it wasn't until I did a lot of psychotherapy around it, and trauma and talking therapy, and then it wasn't until I started studying the shamans that I did a soul recovery, a soul retrieval, that I found this little boy that could trust and that could laugh and that could smile and have a good time. So that's really compelled me. It was my mid-20s, late 20s, compelled me to become a student of the shamans, to learn what they do, not just to study them like we do in the Western world, which is we study them like they were an object. We objectify it so we can study it, putting it under the microscope. But the shamanic traditions are feminine, they're participatory. You can't just look at them and dissect them. You've got to immerse yourself in them.
So it was largely in part of your own healing journey that pulled you into the path?
It was part of my own healing journey, and early on in my academic life, I directed a small brain laboratory at San Francisco State University in the biology department. But when I was 6 and 7 years old, I could see dead people, like many kids can. I could see Uncle Louis had left, and I'd say to my mother, he's coming for his wife. And she said, don't talk about those things. And I shut it down until one day in the biology lab, 10 o'clock at night, everything dark, and I was in the brain lab. So I was surrounded by 200 brains. And I'm taking some notes on some testing we were doing on endorphins and producing your brain endorphins. And I look up at the other end of the room. There are 5 beings, like luminescent beings, directly underneath their brains. And I could hear one of them inside my head say, is this the place of judgment? And I was so dumbfounded. I said, no, this is room 403 in the biology department. They thought that I was some kind of angel because I had a white lab coat on. And then I realized that how biased our Western science is, how it needs to objectify. It's colonialistic science. If you can't explain it, measure it, it doesn't exist. And whereas for the shamans, the invisible world is where everything is happening. And everything in the visible world and the material world originates from there. So they dedicated themselves to mapping the invisible world. And not only mapping, they were cartographers of the soul. And the geography they were interested in was the geography of the journey beyond death, and what is it that determines whether we have a destiny in this world, and how can we shift that?
So there's a lot to unpack from the indigenous shaman view of the self, healing, mind, body, timelines, destiny, all these things I'm looking forward to unpacking with you. You mentioned how the Western medical system very much so uses top-down logic and reasoning to be able to quantify changes, which is of course very useful and has many incredible applications, and also is inherently limited if we're only going to explore practices that could be sort of empirically, qualified with data. So what was it that you fundamentally found lacking in the Western medical system?
Well, I slowly began to understand that we don't have a healthcare system. In America, we have a disease care system, and that's what doctors get trained in. They get trained on treating diseases. And then in the Amazon, one old woman said to me one time, Alberto, illnesses do not exist. Diseases don't exist. Sick people exist, but illnesses don't exist. It's just a combination of different symptoms that your people in the West try to call a disease that they need to treat. You need to treat the person and not the illness. And the idea of the shamans is not to heal cancer or heart disease or dementia, but to prevent them. In fact, the shaman lives very well if the village is healthy. The minute they start getting sick, he gets fired.
I've heard you speak to 1 in 5 people, I believe, in the States have dementia, and the diseases to the same degree and same type are not quite found in those places, correct?
Yeah, in the Amazon, I was originally funded by big Swiss pharma because I was one of the few anthropologists kind of crazy enough to be in the Amazon when there was a lot of revolution happening in the Amazon, in Peru particularly. And they wanted to discover the next great cure for heart disease, or dementia was the big one, Alzheimer's. Because 1 out of 2 people by the age of 85 will have diagnosable Alzheimer's in the West. That means one of us, is scripted to, of course, neither one of us is going to do it because we eat right. And we live right, we forgive, we love, and laugh. But they were interested in what were the shamans doing to have zero dementia. Zero. And it turned out that what they were doing was working with the energy field, with the luminous energy field that surrounds the physical body and that organizes your health as well as your experiences in the world. And see, the main task of the shamans was to protect the wisdom of the village first. And the wisdom of the village was stored in the minds of the elders. And there was no writing in any of the Americas. There were no books to store the wisdom, and it was stored in the brains, the minds of the old people. Imagine if you forgot how to make fire, or how to make a hook, or where the animals went. It would be a problem. So they set out to protect the minds of the elders. And it turned out that when they protected their brains, they also protected their heart, and they also prevented cancer.
Like you mentioned, in the West, we have this very Cartesian way of splitting all of these, like the mind and the body and the spirit, if we even include the latter, and when you speak about working with the energy field and working as treating the person, which is sick, instead of the various thousands of, diseases that we can label, I'm intrigued with the difference in how you differentiate and delineate between knowledge and what we can learn about the body, how we can, again, quantify certain things versus the gnosis of the body and working with the energy field at more subtle realms that we can't intellectually sort of deduce as easily,
Yeah, it's hard to quantify that, but it is quantifiable. The Germans are doing a really good job, and the Russians are doing that, working with the biofield, measuring it and coming up with devices. See, Western medicine is the best medicine in the world, the best for trauma. So if you're bit by a snake, don't go see a shaman, go to the ER. And then go see your shaman to find out why the snake bit you in the first place.
Yeah.
And in the indigenous traditions, and I don't want to embellish the indigenous, there are many, many flaws and faults, but there's an ancient wisdom that we can recover. These were the builders of Machu Picchu. and the pyramids and the Yucatan and mapping the stars. And what they understood was that you were not a product of the past only, which we assume in medicine that you're a product of your genes. What runs in your family? You go to your doctor and she'll ask you, well, tell me what did your parents and grandparents die from? You're not only a product of the family stories, the family dramas from our childhood of the past. We can be the product of the future, that the future can actually reach back like a giant hand and propel us and take us to a place of exceptional health and exceptional creativity. And right now, exceptional design of the future, because we're designing the future in an unprecedented way. Right now, with all of the crises and opportunities that we're facing, from AI to conflict, how do you design a future? You can't repair it, build it up from the past,
Yeah, well, first off, I appreciate you acknowledging the both upsides of the gifts, but then also the shortcomings of both the Eastern and the Western view of things, right? Because it's easy to romanticize, one over the other, but they both bear amazing fruits in different capacities.
Look, we can't become Indians, it's impossible. We live in a Western world. We're Westerners. But we can take the knowledge, and they see in the indigenous societies, they differentiate between information and knowledge or wisdom. Information is facts, or knowing that water is H2O. Wisdom is being able to make it rain. Information is having a diagnosis. Wisdom is being able to heal, not by fixing what went wrong, but by selecting a healed destiny for someone also.
I'm looking forward to how we can select that destiny for ourselves. Fundamentally, how do you really view, and how is the indigenous perspective on the self? Because I think we have this very separate notion, again, in the Western mind of who we are, and we forget the vast connected field. We forget how the flora and fauna that live in and around us and the nature that we're connected to, never separate from. And so what, in your perspective, what do you see the totality of the self?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the totality of the self that we perceive is the measurable. You've got nice body temperature, 97.5 degrees. You have, I'm just getting over a cold. So we perceive these things and we want to medicate them or make them better. In the invisible world is a realm that is timeless. You're outside of ordinary time. And we know this we call it the quantum field. We know the quantum field is non-local to time or to space. And we know the other quality of the quantum field is that there's no agent, there's no doer, but things happen. So the operating principle there is intentionality. So those are the two keys here. Break free from time and have an intention that is bigger than you are.
So much of your work has been also guiding and creating space for people to experience the vastness of their self. It's easy to have an intellectual idea of a self that's beyond space and time and that is quantum entangled with past versions and a future destiny and all these things. But when someone comes into deep stillness and actually experiences and tastes their true nature, it's transformative on contact.
Totally. Absolutely. And this gets us into where you find the know thyself carved on top of
Delphi.
Yeah, in Delphi. Because this was the one psychedelic and the experience that you would have in your life. You would prepare for that. And the topic was to die before you died. To die before you died because you didn't want to save that final journey into infinity for your last breath. You wanted to find the maps, and now, well, you still have a body to come back to. And that was part of the initiations that would lead you to not a place of having more information or more factual knowledge or more data. We're not data-driven anymore, but into what the Greeks called gnosis. Gnosis means direct learning, tapping into the hard drive of the cosmos. So not that you know everything, but that you know the all. And then you can apply it to anything. So you become a skilled navigator through life and not simply accumulating more facts and more information. You had gnosis, deep, profound knowingness of the totality.
I know you've been privileged to be with many amazing, incredible masters and shamans throughout time. You spoke how through oral tradition for over 500 years in certain traditions, that these practices have been carried and passed along. I would love for you to share a bit of how you came into that, how they trusted you, and yeah, what came after.
Yeah, that's a really good story, actually, because I had contact with an indigenous group that were prophecy keepers that had no contact with the West. I was the first American anthropologist to have contact with them. They lived at high mountaintops, and they were the keepers of a prophecy, but also more than the prophecy of the processes to become a new human, Homo luminous. And when I first went to their villages, these were the poorest Indians in the Americas. They wanted no contact with the white. They welcomed me as a great healer. So and that's because I took some Western medication with me. Because even though they had no contact with the West, they had contact with other Indians who had been exposed to, they were babies with big distended bellies. And we have great antibiotics that work really well. There was one medicine woman that said to her husband, who was a renowned shaman, said, "Look at this boy. His medicine works so much better than yours. One day." So basically, I was taking some painkillers, taking some supplements for the babies, for the children, because they were not getting it fully in mother's milk. And then I was welcomed. And then I went into the second layer of depth. It took me 10 years to do that. Because at first I thought very superficially, wow, this is an amazing wisdom tradition. How do we translate this to the West? And then they said, you got to learn it first. So I had to do my vision quest. I had to do work in the Amazon with the medicine plants. I had to face fear and understand that fear, and especially the fear of dying, is at the source of all disease. Because today I know the brain chemistry, because, you get caught in a fight or flight loop, which happens fight, flight, freeze is the sequence. And you start producing the brain chemicals, the adrenaline and cortisol that are deadly, that create psychosomatic disease. And the ultimate fear, of course, that triggers fight or flight is the fear of your mortality, of your death. Part of the big longevity movement that's happening now in America and the world is to try to offset this understanding that the mortality rate is still 100%. And that can be scary when you apply it to you. So the basis of my training at that point was to face fear and become friends with it, invite death to the dinner table. One of the medicine women, he said, "You like girls so much, you think of death as a lover. Death has to be your lover, because out of death comes life. It's the cycles, the great cycles. Your skin cells die every 6 days. My new book, Grow a New Brain, you grow a whole new brain every 22 days, an entirely new brain. So we live with death. And if we befriend it, then we can kick up to the higher brain, where we're not producing the stress molecules, but the bliss molecules. We begin producing the endogenous psychedelics."
I love how you really so eloquently bridge how these ancient healing wisdom traditions and emerging sciences through neuroplasticity and epigenetics are not two separate things, but they're two ways of looking at the same thing. And when you speak to how our body is constantly renewing itself, and the person 7 years from today is not the same person, there's this old philosophical axiom of, you take a ship and you take each wooden plank apart one by one and start replacing it with new ones. And by the time you replace a whole new ship,
You start again.
Yeah, I start again. And is it the same ship? It brings in questions about what is the self and the ephemeral nature of self and our mind and body. But it does bring into, question here the possibility to completely rewrite our life, our vitality, and how we can really serve the world, because we have the ability to change and transform at any given moment. So I would love for you to explore the consiliency between the emerging sciences and epigenetics, neuroplasticity, and our ability to heal.
Yeah, resilience is really the key. So the goal for longevity, basically the first rule of longevity is don't do anything stupid. Don't die young, all right? And then you've got to really find a harmonic engagement with your environment, not just with the supplements you're taking, with nature, with the sun, with sunlight, with how you breathe, and with where your food comes from. I used to bless my food, I don't do that anymore. I use my food to bless me. And this is the keys that come so naturally to indigenous people because they are nature. And we are too. We are all indigenous, all of us in this planet. And we're all natural. It's not animals out there, and we're not animals. We're animals. We're biological beings. And if we can commune and be part of this great chain of life, extraordinary the knowledge that grows within you. And it's interesting because to us, the mind is in the brain. But for so many of the indigenous people around the world, Himalayas, the Americas, the mind is in the heart.
We've forgotten the intelligence of the heart.
Yeah, we have.
What, from that perspective and those traditions, do you think is most important to be reminded of about that?
Epigenetics and neuroplasticity. Those are the keys right there. So part of the problem we have is that there's a religious movement in America that's very dangerous, and we have to be careful with, and it's called modern science.
Materialism.
Yeah, everybody's addicted. It's scientific, and it turns out that half of the articles published in the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine are bogus. And this is what their chief editors wrote in an editorial. Half of the science we're guiding our lives with is bogus, is not legitimate. And we have to become our own chief scientist. And the best way to approach that is after this experience of gnosis, where then you understand what epigenetics is about. Epigenetics is choreographing this orchestra of genetic expression. And you can silence genes, 2,000 genes that create disease in 24 hours by eating your own homemade broccoli sprouts. Incredible epigenetic modifier. But everything you eat, actually, and everything you feel, every emotion is epigenetically influencing your genetic expression. And the neuroplasticity, again, we have to remember we are neuronal creatures. That the heart has a brain, 100 million neurons. The gut has a huge brain, and there are all these creatures, all of nature is living inside you. So if we can bring the gut, the heart, and the brain in harmony with each other, and it turns out that there's a neurochemical that does that, which is called serotonin. And serotonin is produced in your gut from tryptophan, which is commonly in foods. But today we've been breeding foods for sweetness, whereas 100 years ago, foods had 4 times the tryptophan content. Tryptophan is turned into serotonin. The first job is to help you digest, to move food through your gut. The second job is to work its way up through your vagus nerve into your brain and to repair your hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where learning happens. It's what gets damaged with dementia and with Alzheimer's. Serotonin repairs the hippocampus. That's why you have the SSRIs, very popular medication, that flood your brain with serotonin. And then if you can quiet the brain, go into stillness, the pineal will begin to take serotonin and turn it into melatonin. So you can sleep. Or so you can sleep and rest. Many people sleep and don't rest. And then if you got that covered, then the pineal will take serotonin and add a couple of methyl groups to it. Remember, serotonin is a tryptamine, and turn it into 2-dimethyltryptamine, which in the jungle they call ayahuasca, and which is produced especially when you're born, when you make love, and when you die. So you can take your consciousness with you
And it can't be any coincidence that those three moments, the moment of creation, the moment of entering this plane, and the moment of leaving it, both are coincided with the pharmacological release internally of DMT.
Totally. But you got to have the precursors.
Yeah. So then what would you say are the lowest hanging fruit to be able to cultivate those precursors in our body? Because we can work from the energetic level, the biological level, the neurological level. If the nutrient density in our food is so much less than what it used to be, that's just one example. And so where do we go from here?
Look, the easiest way is to rely on some supplements. Like I buy powdered tryptophan and I put it in my smoothie in the morning. Don't put too much because you'll get a little bit of a tummy ache. Or 5-HTP, you can take it in the evening. Again, precursors for tryptophan. But the problem is that if your gut is broken, taking antibiotic, you're not going to be able to manufacture serotonin. You don't have the bugs to do that.
How important do you think, like, doing blood work and seeing deficiencies and whatnot? I know a mutual friend, Mark Hyman, has Function Health, which I've loved working with recently. What's the efficacy, like the importance of getting under the hood in that aspect?
I think that if you can I love Function. And Mark and I have worked together for many, many decades. He's been to the Amazon with me a bunch of times and to Chile. And we've done programs together bringing cutting edge medicine and the energy medicine of the shamans. So that's important info. But then you got to take those lab reports and feed it into ChatGPT and say, give me an analysis of how I'm doing. What are my weak spots? Because a doctor will say, oh, your blood sugar levels are good, and you have your lead levels are fine. Your aluminum a little bit high, your mercury. No, you want to know how it all works together. You don't go to the car shop and say, how's my left tire working? You want to know how all of it is working together. And today, the AI engines can give you an amazing analysis if you feed that data to them. And then you have to be sure that you don't think that that's the only reality.
Yeah. Hey guys, a quick one. It just so happened to work out perfectly with the timing of this conversation with Alberto. If you're serious about understanding what's happening on the inside of your body, Function Health is the platform I trust and choose because they offer over 160 advanced lab tests, which is way more than your average checkup. And you get to see all of your results tracked over time in one secure platform. It's recommended by folks like Dr. Mark Hyman and Andrew Huberman, and after getting my labs done with them, I can understand why. The lab visits are quick and convenient at more than 2,000 locations nationwide. The membership is just $4.99 a year, which is just $1.37 a day, and you get your insights from top doctors based on your unique results. There's no supplement upsells or pharma pitches, just pure, unbiased health data. Knowing what's happening inside your body is important for living with vitality, no matter your age or where you're at in your health journey. If you want to take ownership of your health, check out Function. The first 1,000 of you listeners will get a $100 credit towards membership. Just go to functionhealth.com/know thyself or use code know thyself 100 to get started. I hope you enjoy. Good luck. Back to the episode. So much of your work is kind of working at the core root. And as the saying goes, the formless informs the form. There are many more, a big sea of invisible forces that are working in and around and through us. And working with the energy body is yet one example of working with things at the kind of the source code level, if you will.
Absolutely.
Because of course it's important to look under the hood and work with the blood and the biology, and it's so easy to just go either or, one or the other, right?
You got to do it all. Luckily, we have those tools like Function Health. We have labs, and we need to get the information, but then we need to not get wedded to the information and create a holistic, integrative plan. And I think something that's important to keep in mind here is that we're not a lab report. We're not your blood sugar level. You're not your creatinine level. You're not that's liver, kidney function. You're not your liver enzymes. You're a living miracle. And when I was seeing patients privately, here in LA, they would come into my office with a big file full of diagnoses. I wanted to know what was wrong, but before that, I wanted them to have to really understand that they're not a liver function test. They're not a cancer. They are a living miracle. And if I could get them to entertain that idea, then miracles would happen. Because reality really is not that fixed, it's not that granular. But I'll tell you where I learned about the field, the energy field. I had my research sponsored by a foundation many years ago, my late 20s. And they called me up and they said, we need a junior anthropologist in Haiti for a voodoo study we're doing. And I said, I don't know anything about voodoo. My expertise is the upper Amazon. They said, yeah, we know. We're looking at your grant proposal right now. I said, when do you need me in Haiti? So the following week I was in Haiti and I got the junior anthropology stuff, which was going house to house, finding how many children and but I got to speak with one of the voodoo priests, and voodoo is an amazing healing practice from Africa. Amazing healing practice. But like all energy healing, it depends on the intent of the practitioner. So I asked the voodoo priest, I said, how do you hurt someone? He says, we don't hurt people. Well, when somebody's harming one of your people, how do you bring balance? He said, easy. We take the rattle and we call their energy body to come to us when they're sleeping. And we look at their energy body and we find if there are any dark balls of energy. And then we just tap it, give it a little bit of energy. And a month later, their immune system will collapse. And I go, wow, that's pretty intense. Because it's like double clicking on a program in an app in your desktop, right? Suddenly. And it's not that dark energy was an imprint for heart disease. That was simply dark energy that was going to try to work its way out of the body through the weakest organ. So it could have manifested in any number of symptoms. I said, well, how do you heal? He said, the same way. We called their energy body to come, and then we scan it, and we see this dark mass of energy. In China, they call it stale qi. And we pull it out through one of the chakras. So it doesn't have to work its way out through the body. Oh, fantastic. I learned more about healing in that 1 week trip in Haiti than I had in the last 10 years before in the Amazon.
If I read correctly, at first you had some skepticism and they proved it to you in a sense.
Oh, they did, yeah.
With your own, you wanted them to work on you essentially to see if it was real.
Yeah. I told the senior anthropologist, this stuff is all in your head. If you believe in it, you're doomed. If you don't, nothing can happen to you. Mm-hmm. And he said, you want to bet $100? I said, yeah, which was a lot of money for a graduate student. And we did, and we agreed that the following Saturday, the voodoo priest was going to give me a lesson. And I'm feeling great on Friday. I'm with friends having a glass of wine and dinner. Saturday, I'm throwing up. I think I've got a parasite. On the floor. I already had my appendix out, so it couldn't be. And I was retching and convulsing, and the phone rings, and it's a call from Haiti. He said, are you feeling anything? We're working on you right now. I said, yeah, give him another $20 to reverse whatever he's doing. So this stuff works.
It's an expensive lesson, but you got the message.
I got the message, saved me a lot of personal pain. Yeah. And the idea is that as you go through your own healing process, you don't have to bump into it in reality. You don't have to marry it or work for a person that, that represents your unhealed parts.
I feel like my disposition is a bit similar to yours, and where I don't really believe anything. I come to know it experientially, and that becomes true for me. But unless I work with somebody, hand in hand, for example, I have years back with a really amazing Chinese medicine healer. And when you feel heat coming into your body from somebody's hand, even at a distance, you start to question, okay, either I'm losing it or this is real, and reality is not as I've yet to believe up to this point.
Yeah, and reality and belief don't go together very well. The minute you're wedded to your beliefs, you're going to be running into them in the world.
Yeah.
And that's the key in terms of working with your energy body. And I can do a little demo with you if you want to have an experience of this. So why don't you put your cup down?
Yeah.
And I'm going to come over to where you are.
Okay.
And you've probably seen this before. Let's do some muscle testing. Why don't you put your arm out?
This one, maybe?
Yeah, we can do that one.
Okay.
And I'm going to push down, and I want you to resist. Don't let me push down.
Okay.
Do both of them together like this so you can be stronger.
All right.
Don't let me push down.
Okay.
Wow. You're really strong. Did it work out?
I left a little bit.
Okay. And now I'm going to work on your meridian system.
Okay.
Your acupuncture meridian system with your permission.
Okay.
We have 3 meridians on either side of the chest, and I'm just interfering with the flow. Let me test your strength again.
Okay.
A little higher.
Yep.
Okay. Was it different there? It was a little bit of...
Yeah, I felt like a little bit weaker.
Let's try now with the chakra.
Okay.
So let me just repair this, because I don't want you
Sure.
not being able to sleep tonight. Okay. Okay, let me test your energy now. A little higher.
Mm-hmm.
Resist. You are bulletproof. I cannot. I mean, this is why martial artists work on each other energetically, remotely, before they engage in any kind of contact. They're working on their field. But you have tremendous integrity in your field.
Thanks.
Yeah. Could not get a... Usually, when I'm on camera, I want to make sure that this works, but...
Yeah, no, I think it's so interesting when you, again, work at something at the more fundamental essence. And so if somebody wants to practice and experience something like this more in their daily life, and they want to work with their own energy field, of course, people are familiar with the biological systems and the neural correlates, a lot of things that kind of communicate from the energy fields to the physical body. But if people want to work with the energy, the raw energy, what's an example or something that people can explore?
Well, the best thing is to begin with the chakras. And people ask me, do shamans have chakras? I thought chakras were Hindu. And I say to them, do Africans have livers? I thought livers were European. And the chakras are part of your luminous anatomy. And today we understand how chakras are made. Chakra means a wheel in Sanskrit, and their seers could look at the energy field and they saw these circles spinning, these wheels spinning, 7 of them, and they call them chakras. But a chakra is created when you have an endocrine gland and a nerve bundle on top of it.
So what would be an example physiologically?
Your 7th chakra, your pineal gland, endocrine gland, hormones. And these are the 2 communication systems in the body, the thymus, the genital. So always a hormone gland and a nerve plexus. The nerve is electrical communication, very rapid. The hormone is slow, feelings, moods. And when you're working with the chakras, you're working with the information systems in the body. And you can begin with that. As a practice to do at home is everything in our universe spins in a clockwise direction. We live in a clockwise universe. So you can balance your chakras. I have a 102-year-old mother. She had COVID about 2 months ago. And I checked her chakras using a pendulum remotely. You can do this remotely or do it on yourself with a pendulum and then move your hands from one chakra to the other. I checked her chakras, and the lower 4 chakras were kind of a mess. And so I separated them, spun them, and that afternoon she started complaining to the staff saying, I don't have COVID, get me out of this place, full of people that are dying at 102. So what happens when we have a health crisis is frequently our energy system will go out of balance. And if we can restore harmony in the system, it can then readjust itself at a higher level than it was before. So you don't just repair, you actually upgrade. And this has been beautifully described by the people that are studying complexity. How can a system that's out of equilibrium, and if you have a small coherent island within that system, it can upgrade the entire system. And that's the work that we need to do today as shamans, as modern shamans, is create these islands of coherence in this time of great chaos so we can take that leap, not just fix things, but take that leap.
Yeah, those emergent self-organizing systems that build.
Ilya Prigozhin, that got the Nobel Prize for identifying these systems in 1977.
Wow.
Yeah, chemist, brilliant chemist. But according to the shamans I work with, they say that before we were born, we were all gathered in a great green field. And a very big angel came out and said, it's going to be a very challenging time on Earth. It's going to be war, there's going to be famine, there's going to be violence, there's going to be AI. Who wants to come? And we all volunteered. We wanted to be part of the solution. And that's why we recognized each other so readily, because we've been together before. And we've come here to help to dream a new world into being. That's our primary task. To do that, you have to be healthy, right?
We tend to have this very linear notion of time and reality. And I know various different cultures and traditions have different views on what time is and the time and the moment we currently find ourselves in. According to that Incan tradition, correct? In the perspective of the Homo Luminous, I would love to get your perspective on time and like what age this is.
Yeah. Well, in India, they say this is the Kali Yuga, the era of Kali, of renewal. And in the Andes, they call it the Pachacuti, the turning over of the earth, the restoring balance to the earth, which is never easy, In fact, the Pachacuti refers to putting a plow in the earth and turning the earth over. Interesting thing about the Andean conception is very much like quantum physics, because Pacha doesn't mean earth, it means space, means space-time. It can be used to refer to Earth as well, but it's about turning over space and time. The notion is that time doesn't fly only like an arrow, that the arrow of time, which we subscribe to in the West, is functional, it works. It's not the only kind of time. There's the kind of time that turns like a wheel, or the figure eights and pretzels back onto itself, or you can influence events that occurred in the past, or you can nudge destiny in a particular direction. And the idea is to drop in between the moments to step into infinity, which we're going to do at the end of our lives anyway, so we might as well get some training. And within infinity is before things are born. The Tao says, fix things before they're born. Somaji is here. Change the concept, change the belief structure, change the model. And in these times where everybody's terrified about, bad people using AI, and even more terrified about bad AIs, this is a tremendous time of opportunity where we need to really examine the limiting beliefs that we have and be able to step into a new relationship with intelligence that works on a completely different kind of time like ours does. But in the shamanic notion, you can influence events that occurred in the past. You can influence destiny. You can do a destiny retrieval and not only a soul retrieval, which is going to the past along someone's timeline. You can follow that timeline into the future. See, the way a timeline works is like a rope, like a golden rope. And here in the present, you have all of these threads that are possibilities. And the possibility we may want, if we're going through a health crisis, may not be a very probable one. But as long as it's permissible, you can summon the energies and the wisdom to help shift the timeline to align with your new state of health, or with the world that we want to have our children be born into.
it can feel extremely frightening with everything that you see pop up on the news day in and day out. And I think it's important to have the micro perspective of what we can do to serve locally in our communities and in that way. And then also it's helpful to understand from a macro perspective the time that we're in. And I know, again, through these different indigenous perspectives, like the Mayans, who had various different types of calendars for different lengths of periods of time.
Yeah, the Mayans have 23 calendars.
And yeah, it's fascinating to see the overlap, too, of what people say about this time, and particularly leading up to 2030.
Yeah, the Andean perspective is one of tremendous, very optimistic. We got to get rid of this dystopian future, Forget about that. You can't be part of it if you're already subscribed to the worst case scenario. So we got to get rid of that notion and know that that we're in the midst of huge, extraordinary change. And that part of what we can do individually is future track. See, this is what the shamans did all the time. If you were a shaman in the coast, you were a medicine woman, you had to lead the fishermen to where the fish were going to be the next morning. If you were a medicine man in the mountains, you had to lead the hunters to where the buffalo was going to be the next day. If you got there and there were fresh buffalo prints, you got fired. You had to future track. And today, the fabric of time and reality is so malleable that we can future track states of extraordinary health, that we can anchor into our timeline in the future so we can increase the resilience of our systems in the face of all of the assaults that we're getting in the food, the water we drink, the air we breathe. So yes, to do that, we have to do what the Tao says, fix things before they're born.
Could you help walk somebody new to this through the medicine wheel and the directions and how they correlate to our psychology and spirituality? That's a big topic.
In 3 minutes or less, for sure.
Maybe we can do a little bit of an overview, and then we can dive into different things if we want.
So the medicine wheel is a map. It's a vehicle, actually. But it's a 3-dimensional map of how you can become Homo luminous, of how you can reinform your biology, how you can be informed directly by nature and not need to optimize your immunity by getting sick, which is how we normally, when we get a cold, we'll never get that cold again. But what if we could download the codes from the field that would train our own immune system? But the medicine wheel has 4 steps that are described by 4 power animals: the serpent, the jaguar, the hummingbird, and the eagle, or the condor. The way of the serpent is shedding the past the way you shed your skin, which is all at once. And it requires understanding that what happened to you is just a story. This is an interesting approach to trauma. Trauma is not what happened to you. Trauma is the story you wrap around it. And then when you understand that you're not the story, you can be the storyteller, then healing is accelerated. And so that's point number 1. Then the serpent also returns you to the mother. So you can have your belly on the belly of the mother, the belly of the earth. The return to the mother, the return to the goddess, to the feminine, to Pachamama. She wants us to be well. Once we take those steps, and this is what I do professionally today, I train modern shamans, and my wife and I use the medicine wheel as the training tool. Then you go to the jaguar in the West. Jaguar medicine is about becoming fearless. It doesn't mean that you don't get afraid ever. It means you're not trapped in the grip of fear. You're not living in fight or flight. You can chill. Jaguar medicine is about daring to go into those hidden places that we don't want to look at and finding what's there and bringing it to consciousness and to awareness. Jaguar medicine is about no longer being an earth parasite, but becoming an earth keeper. Because the jaguar is at the top of the food chain. It has no enemies, no predators. So jaguar medicine is really important today because we step beyond death. And the initiation in that step is that you die before you die. We spoke about that earlier. And then you go into the hummingbird. And hummingbird medicine is about the epic journey. Because hummingbirds migrate from Brazil to Canada. And they're not even made for flight. They're not sitting around saying there are no flowers to suck on till we get to Cuba, and I'm too overweight, I'm too skinny, I don't have enough time, enough money, enough sleep. No, they say yes to the calling from spirit. And that's a hard one, that's a tough one. I had my calling from spirit when my children were little. And I kept saying to God, but my kids are little, I need to teach at the university, I need a job, how am I going to... I was using my kids as an excuse with God, And we're at the point today when it's essential that we say yes to our great hero's journey. Because in our culture, we're encouraged to be in the victim's journey, medicating ourselves, talking about what's wrong with us, ongoing therapy. There's nothing more boring than being with a 50-year-old who's still dealing with mommy-daddy issues. Like, come on, there's more to life. Hummingbird medicine and saying yes to the great calling, even without having enough money, enough time, enough resources, enough knowledge, saying yes. That act of saying yes becomes an act of power that the universe really supports at that time. And then the fourth step is eagle medicine. And eagle medicine has no obstacles. They just fly a little bit higher. So you don't keep bumping into obstacles. You just learn to rise above them. You learn to open your inner vision so you can see with clarity not only the invisible world that becomes open to you, but you can see more mundane things. Like you can see when somebody's lying to you, which is really blatantly obvious, but we don't want to see it. And to be able to awaken that medicine, that power, you first have to be willing to see everything about yourself. And that's terrifying. Your beauty, your horribleness, your viciousness, and all of the things that we project onto others, including our beauty and our great power.
That's fascinating that we can also be terrified, not just of our own perceived inadequacies, but also the power of our light. It can be terrifying, eh?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying. We keep looking for what our purpose is, and our purpose is to be terrified and find it and create it, and not just wait until you get the handwriting on the wall, but you co-create that your meaning and your purpose with spirit, and you have free options.
So from working with those, from the serpent to the jaguar to the hummingbird to the eagle, which, by the way, I mentioned to you, I was talking to my neighbor who did a healing session with you when he was young in your clinic in Santa Monica. Right after we mentioned your name, an eagle swooped down right next to us. Whoa. Flew like maybe 2 feet from the ground.
Really?
And just flew. Yeah, I was like, well, there's Alberto.
It's that the universe begins speaking to you, and you move out of the realm of logic, which is founded on cause and effect, causality, and you move into synchronicity, what Carl Jung calls synchronicity.
I wanted to ask you about this because I'm curious how you delineate, like as you raise your sensitivity, you start to experience more of these, what you might say is coincidence, synchronicities. At the same time, it can be easy to fall into the notion every time you see 1111 on your microwave that you think God is speaking to you. Who knows? Maybe it is. Maybe, but how do you discern, I guess, your connection to life's messages that are around you and what you're labeling on top of, I suppose, your surroundings, top down, bottom up?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because every time you see 444, you don't want to go, oh, I'm really cool, God is paying special attention to me. And that's narcissistic. That's getting into the trap. And that's happening all the time, by the way. And then there are the bigger synchronicities. And you want to eventually have the kind of synchronicity where you one day sit down and meditate, envisioning peace in the world, and it happens. Because synchronicities are invitations, they're non-causal events. And the minute you begin to participate with those natural dynamics of non-causal relationships, then you step into the divine place, into the God place, into saying, hey, you are also a creator, a co-creator. What do you want to create?
Would you say that as you grow on your journey, you're actually experiencing more of those synchronistic experiences are coming into your life, or your ability to pay attention to them and become aware of them is increased?
They're really good feedback when you get them, and you go, God, I'm in alignment with things. But then you get a dry spell, and life is testing you, saying, can you create synchronicity? Can you become the synchronicity? Not just wait for external events. Become that sacred synchronicity that can be empowering your mission here on the earth. But we have to be careful we don't get seduced and deluded easily. And it has to be in service to a greater whole than you.
Hey fam, one thing that brings me a sense of ease and joy in my life, like I hope this episode is bringing you, is my morning ritual. Having healthy habits in the morning that build the foundation for steady energy throughout the rest of the day is a major key. And for me, every day I start with shrooms. Not the psychedelic kind, but through a coffee alternative like the ones in Mudwtr, where their blend contains adaptogenic mushrooms like lion's mane to support focus, chaga and reishi to support your immune system. And for me, drinking something like cacao instead of coffee in the morning is a win, and I rarely go without it. If you don't know, Mudwtr is 100% organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, sugar-free, and vegan. I absolutely love the company. My buddy Shane is the founder, and I know how much intention they put into their creations. If you want to give them a try out, you can go to mudwtr.com/knowthyself and grab your starter kit, which looks like this. Right now, our community gets an exclusive deal, which is up to 43% off your entire order, plus a free rechargeable frother and even free shipping. Again, that's up to 43% off at mudwtr.com/know thyself. I hope that you enjoy. It's interesting what happens when you devote your life in a direction that is greater than you and what becomes available to you. It feels like as we live, and it's spoken of throughout various different scriptures about living in alignment with our Dharma, and how when you protect your purpose and your Dharma, it protects you. And you are given what you're needed in a sense. So have you come to experience that in your own life?
Yeah, it's, for a long time, I was motivated by rebellion. I wanted to show my peers that these people that they dismissed, the indigenous people, they said, why do you want to study them? They can't even read or write. Which means you're illiterate, and if you're illiterate, you're stupid. I said, how can you be stupid and still build pyramids, cities in the clouds like Machu Picchu? Our Western science is very dismissive of the ancient traditions. And that's the colonialistic attitude that's prevalent in Western science. But from that period in my life, I was still operating from my karma. I was in battle mode. I'm going to show you how wrong you are. And then I went into Dharma, and in Dharma, it became effortless. There's an effortless quality to being in the flow of your own journey, where there's no efforting required. There's a lot of work, but efforting is trying to bend reality to fit your needs, and then you're arguing with reality, and you're going to end up losing always,
Yeah. The awakened state doesn't mean you sit inert in a cave somewhere, although you might want to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
But that your action isn't being fueled from your own sense of egocentricity. Like you're doing what you ought to do in any given moment and what needs to be done, which is then you're responding to life instead of just continually reacting to your own neuroses.
Yeah. And confusing that for reality too. So one of the teachings of hummingbird medicine is called non-doing. But witnessing how things happen as soon as you stop being the doer. In the South, another one of the practices is that things stop happening to you and they begin happening for you. And you go, oh, what a gift. how can I turn this diagnosis into a gift? I've got it, and then that becomes your quest. So they're great gifts in the medicine traditions, and it works at 4 different levels. So we've talked about the medicine wheel, serpent, jaguar, hummingbird. Eagle, it talks about 4 levels of reality. The first one is the serpent level, and the language of that level is molecules, brain chemistry, body chemistry, physical. So the second level, which is jaguar, is the emotional, the mind. And we know the mind influences the body. And the language of that level is conversational language. And it's interesting that every one of us has an inner dialogue going all the time. And one of the purposes of mantra is to quiet this inner dialogue, because the very first neural circuits of language happen on survival circuits, because we didn't say, hey, Andre, how was your day today? No, tiger, ow. So, and it still operates at that lower brain level, which is scripting our reality in a very limited way. So we become masters of the mind. How do you quiet the mind without struggling with it? And then the level above it, as hummingbird, is the level of what we would call the soul. The soul informs the mind, that informs the body, and the level of the soul is without words. There's no language, spoken language. Maybe a little poetry. Rumi maybe could go there, but. And then the level above that, which is the level of eagle, is pure energy. So you've got to work at all 4 of these levels. You've got to change your diet and exercise more. You've got to find quiet and peace in your mind and practice forgiveness. And then at the soul level, you've got to, every breath you take, the meditation you get at that level is a breathing practice. And it goes like this. When I inhale, I go, I am. And hopefully the very last breath you take, you can attach the I am to it. The breath will be gone, but I am will remain there. And then at the level of the energetic, you understand that everything in the seen and the unseen world is composed of energy strands that organize themselves in a particular form and that have a name for a short time. And that we need to interact at all levels. You can't just be stuck at this energetic void of emptiness, because that's denying reality. That's where you were born here. There's no chocolate in the spirit world. They're born here to have an experience of being embodied.
Yeah. We spoke to working with the physical version, reality of the Russian doll, so to speak. Is there anything you'd like to add about the psycho-emotional component of disease, illness, struggle that we experience in the denser level physiologically? Again, it is something that I think Western maybe medicine is starting to catch up to, but it sees them as very split things. And so when you look at healing an individual, of course we can do the blood work,
Sure.
eat the right foods, all the things. Yet there are these subconscious programs, fears, things that we haven't resolved within us that have the physiological correlates and consequences. And so what do you think about healing from at that level and the importance of it?
I think it's essential. My view is that every illness doesn't have an 80% psychosomatic component. It has a 100% psychosomatic component that's expressing symptoms now through the body. And if you treat the symptoms without treating the root cause, it doesn't matter how much you change your diet and how much you need to get to find that place of forgiveness and then gratitude. So it goes in that order. The first thing is you believe that things have been done to you and you want to forgive the people that did it. Very liberating. And then the next step is you want to be grateful to them, or be grateful to life for having offered you this lesson. And one of my students asked me, why should I be grateful to this relative that violated me and abused me sexually? I said, not to him, but to life. And what are the gifts that you received? What did you learn from those terrible experiences that you hope will never happen again? So there the things happen for you, not to you. And I practice gratitude. That's the only practice ultimately, really, at the level of hummingbird.
I think as you explore reality in these different ways, I've definitely, and I'm sure many people who are listening to this podcast by virtue of alignment, have gone through periods of more existential inquiry about what life is, who I am, what do I make of this life? And you have an interesting distinction between destiny and fate. And I would love for you to just explore your perspective on that. And yeah, claiming certain timelines in our life. And for somebody that's listening to this episode right now, that of course wants to make the most of their life, die before they die, and live in a harmonious state that leads to a certain fate, what would you?
Yeah, this is a really fine separation between destiny and fate. And the sense here is that fate has been preordained for you by your family dynamics, by your genetics, by your skin color. Fate has been preordained. Whereas destiny, you get to select. Now, the Greeks were not too convinced that you had such a thing as destiny. They said there were the three fates. One of them wove the thread, the other one cut the thread, and the other one wove the cloth of your life. I think it was Cleto that cut cord of your longevity. And now there's a new set of genes that have been found called the Cleto genes, which are the longevity genes, appropriate name. But the shamanic perspective is that you do have a choice to craft a destiny. And to do that, you need to finish the process of rebelling against the family you were born into, the things that happened to you, because at that point, it becomes a distraction. Prior to that, it becomes a necessary exploration of how you were wounded and how you were hurt. And at the point of crafting a destiny, if you continue doing that, it's a distraction from your destiny. You're still going to be in the hands of fate. And that requires a statement of intent, of saying, this is what I am choosing to do, even without having enough information about whether it's right for me or not. So you take a stand and you decide the kind of people you want to be with, and you clean up the friendships that are not leading you to being your best and your highest self. And you're going to lose a lot of friends because a lot of them were convenience friends. And you may even go through a dark night of the soul, a period of wondering, who am I? Why am I doing this? It was, that marriage that I was in was not the best, but at least, So it's the story of when the Israelites left Egypt, and Moses was saying, come on, we got to leave Egypt. He said, well, it's not much of a life, but at least we get a couple of weeks holiday a year. We're building pyramids for the Pharaoh. So, you no longer tolerate the things that compromise your integrity or your sense of wholeness or being, despite what the apparent cost is going to be. It's an act of courage, but life will keep bringing you to it until you say yes one day.
It does seem that way, that we will experience lessons repeatedly until we, in essence, pass the test,
You'll keep repeating the grade until you...
Yeah. That message of dying before you die and being on the sincere path of self-realization means that you need to confront all of those parts of you that are tied to old paradigms and stories that are no longer serving. It can be quite frightening in the moment when you are identified with a part of yourself in that context. And I'm just wondering, what have you seen really support people and yourself on the path of letting go of those versions of identity that are no longer serving?
Yeah, that's, at my age, I've had the chance to coach a number of people, and myself as well, which I don't recommend. I recommend that if you get a coach, get somebody else who can help you. You're your own worst coach. I love the French description of an orgasm. They call it the little death, le petit mort. And this is, and when you go through that little death, it's orgasmic. I mean, you have this heavenly, it's not a genital, it's this heavenly, celestial laugh that comes out of, and nothing's changed. Everything is the same, but nothing's changed. But everything's different. So it's more readily available to us than we'd like to think. We believe we have to struggle to make our way to become enlightened or become self-realized. And when in the shamanic traditions, all it takes is a yes. Yes. And you live in a state of yes. In fact, they have a word for it called aini. And aini in the Quechua language means reciprocity. You have a reciprocal relationship with nature, with your partner, with life. Life supports you, you support life. But the other translation of aini means yes. You live in a state of yes. If you have to wait for spirit to ask you if you're ready for, no, you say yes before you get asked. And to live in that state of yes, it's a discipline, it's a practice. It's not saying it once, but saying it to every moment, every opportunity that you have. You say, yes, this is for my highest and the highest good in my journey.
Yeah, it's such a persistent delusion that we place a future state of being more worth our presence and a more ideal place. Not that we can't strive for better surroundings or experience, but the owning our current moment and challenges with presence, I feel like allows us to actually move through them and get the lesson and pass the grade, like you were speaking to. But it's become difficult in a culture, society, familiar, growing up through a family and education system that really is in so many ways calcifying us into a small perceived version of self, and have very much so lost connection to the nature around us and within us. And as we want to say yes to life and live in that reciprocity with nature, I would love to just some perspectives from you on really practical things and practices people can apply in their life to remember their connection to nature.
Yeah, well, you can't really forget it ever, because you eat, you poop, you breathe, you can't. So know that you are nature, and then walk. Don't go for a walk with your cell phone. Leave it at home. Connect to nature. Connect with what's your environment. And connect with people, make eye contact with them, touch someone, discreetly, but have some contact with them. So those are all practices that can be very viable and powerful. What I would recommend the most, and I like that you use that word calcified, because if you have calcium in your body that's designed to be going to your bones, but instead it's going into your arteries, it's in the wrong place, and we do that because we don't have enough vitamin K2. K2 transports calcium from blood vessels to bones so you don't get osteoporosis. And we get calcified when we don't transport the wisdom that's offered to us to its destination. When we try to hoard it, or we try to limit it, or we try to decipher it too quickly, we suffer in the West from premature evaluation. We want to make sense of this too quickly. You wake up in the morning, you've got a fresh dream, and you want to, what's it saying to me? Hold it, go back to bed, hug the pillow. Look at it from the 4 levels, not just the literal level, but from your emotional, every part of you, of the dream is a part of you. From hummingbird, what is the sacred message? And then invite that practice of gnosis. But to get to that, you need to be comfortable with the fact that death is our constant companion.
You mentioned earlier how our fear of death is at the root of all disease. Personally, it's a topic I'm exploring a lot right now. Also, I know we have a mutual friend, Sadhguru, who just came out with a book about death as well. So it's in the field right now, for me. I think it's so powerful, the contemplation about our own mortality and what that means about bringing presence to life and to truly live this life. It feels like we're so often under the presumption that we're just going to live forever, and we take for granted our current moment. Is there any other thought you have there on how death and life are on the same side of one coin?
Mm-hmm.
And by by embracing, death in many different forms through old versions of ourselves to the physiological level, we can unlock our true vitality and true life.
There's a way that people used to die before they started dying in hospitals. And there was a wonderful article published in the New England Journal of Medicine, written, co-authored by 800 nurses, about this way of dying, which is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And if you do that, if you stop eating and drinking, you can die at home. Today we understand what the body goes through. You don't eat, you don't drink, you start burning your own body fat, you go into ketosis, you get alert, you get bright. And nurses report that out of a scale of 10, this style of dying that anybody can do is an 8, between 8 and a 9, versus the way we've seen our loved ones die. And we all have parents or loved ones that are getting older, and that, they are precariously balanced in this. How do you turn the end of your life over to the medical system when it hasn't been fair to you the rest of your life? It's not going to save you now. And one of the things that all of these nurses point out is that when you do that dying practice, which is the way people used to die, you stop eating, drinking, but the body still begins to burn this body fat. You get very lucid, and then you have a moment that they call, I forget what they call it.
Terminal lucidity?
Terminal lucidity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and terminal lucidity, 1 out of 3 people experience that, which is that, mom has come back and she recognizes me and is talking to everybody and remembering her youth. And it lasts for a few hours or sometimes a couple of days. And then people make the mistake of saying, mom is getting better. Let's see what medical intervention. And it's called terminal lucidity because it happens right before death. And it happens, of course, when we start burning fat for fuel for 3 or 4 days. And when we get a rush of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, ayahuasca, in your pineal gland in your brain, and you suddenly understand life. So this is why getting to that place through your practice, which could be meditation or even intermittent fasting to turn on your fat-burning engines, and then practicing a stillness practice that can allow for you to see through the veil of death.
It's fascinating how in those cases where even somebody with immense Alzheimer's or dementia and terminal lucidity kicks in and it's perfect clarity and recall and memory and
a broken brain.
That's a trip.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. So we have to be able to have access to that experience, not the last couple of days of your life, but today. That's what you want to cultivate, is that non-terminal lucidity, that present moment lucidity, and have a little taste of it and have and have that become a source of self-guidance.
Yeah. I think it's a point of guidance that we've largely lost in the modern world is our allies in the plant and animal kingdom, and returning to our true nature. And I would love to just explore it a bit more with you. We went through the medicine wheel earlier, a little bit through the animal kingdom and whatnot. And I know so much of your practice and also in the indigenous shaman practices as well, working with various plant medicines. I'm curious about what your thoughts are on the efficacy of these in the right context, in the right set, in the right setting, with the right teachers and the right guidance to be able to experience and remember that state.
Yeah. I write about this in my new book, Grow a New Brain. And what I do today is to train modern shamans that know the visible and the invisible world. And the plant medicine has always played a very important part in all of the Native American traditions, except the ones that use vision quest or dark retreats, for example, which were triggering the endogenous production of your own psychedelics in your brain. Psilocybin is a methylated dopamine. Ayahuasca is identical to serotonin. Why did God give us, receptor sites for all of these amazing plants? And it's because they have been catalytic of evolution. And today, as we're approaching this evolutionary quandary that we're in, where we need to take a quantum leap, I think that I know more plant medicine ceremonies happening in LA than I do in the Amazon. Because they're everywhere, in London, in LA, and in Berlin. And so we're looking for it. We're looking for it, and we don't have the endogenous support, which is what we need to do as well, to supplement with the 5-HTP, with the tryptophan, so you don't just you had dinner with the goddess 2 days ago, and now you can't remember anything. So you can integrate it. What I tell people is we have to wake up, and then we have to grow up, and then we have to show up.
Yeah, I did a whole episode on Ken Wilber's framework with also in Dr. John Churchill's. He added and make space for the fuck up.
Yeah.
When we fall short on that process as well.
Totally. Yeah. And that's going to be intermittent, in between each one of these steps. It's love yourself despite of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. But that process of growing up and of waking up and growing up and showing up really does require the integration process, because our life is so much of the path of awareness, a growth of awareness, and that integration of that. And where the westernized, in certain cases, appropriated versions of plant medicine ceremonies can go wrong is it's a roller coaster ride to get high and not the right setting to integrate it into your being and use it as a catalyst, because awareness is great, right? And we can gain buckets of awareness
but it's not enough.
Huh?
It's not enough.
Right. So yeah, I would just love for you to speak to the importance of that.
I'll tell you how I'm microdosing now, and I'm microdosing with ayahuasca, but it's a very diluted ayahuasca at homeopathic dosage.
Like subperceptual. Like, do you even notice? Really?
You don't notice anything, but it uptrains your energy field, and it catalyzes the endogenous production. So this is like the LM at the 50,001. It's nothing. There's nothing chemical there any longer, but there's the imprint, energetic imprint. I mean, microdosing, other things, they're wonderful. They're very insightful, creative processes. But for me, the DMT and the relationship to serotonin, I think is really critical, because serotonin and DMT are ubiquitous in the plant kingdom and in the animal kingdom. This is the spirit molecule for all forms of life. Rocks are the only ones that don't have it. So why did the Great Spirit select this particular molecule? And as I do this homeopathic dosing, my luminous body recognizes the instructions. I get the code. And I think that the plant, the ayahuasca in particular, has really taken over the planet. I think it's fantastic that the plant is everywhere. We don't have the training. When I first did ayahuasca, I had to fast for 2 weeks and do special cleanses. And, we go Friday night. We don't prepare for it. But we need to find how we can prepare for each one of us individually. What intentionality do you bring? How do you support your brain with the omega-3 so you can then integrate it, carry it home with you? And we have the science. We know how to do it. That's the beauty of it.
Do you feel that as you grow and raise your own sensitivity, your reliance on exogenous catalysts for these states are lessened in terms of how much you're required, and you have the ability to, at will and through your practices, endogenously create these states?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, people ask me, do you meditate, Alberto? I said, yeah, I meditate. How long do you meditate for? Yeah, I got it down to about 23 hours a day. You come into the state of communion with all life. It's not high. You're not watching, the table melt in front of you. You're not seeing power animals in the jungle, which is amazing. When you become a jaguar, you go into the jungle, but you're in harmonious engagement. And I think that that's what we can all do. We're all called to do that.
Amazing. Well, listen, I mean, I think the way that you are able to be a bridge and have been for so long, integrating these different perspectives from the psychological to the spiritual to the biological is really needed right now more than ever. Because as you spoke to, this time of emerging Homo luminous, we need these wisdom keepers and teachers to be a bridge for the coming together and cohesion of these different understandings and perspectives, because we're so identified with one perspective being right over the other, instead of acknowledging how they're all interplayed into one big play, so.
And Homo Luminous is you and I and every one of our viewers. And the first step is yes. Yes. Say yes, yes. Not maybe, or maybe when I get a good night's sleep. No, yes. You step into yes, into that I need, that right relationship with all of nature and life. Well, thank you for having me in your program.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to have danced with you with all these topics.
Yeah. It's my favorite thing ever. So I love getting to dive deep around all these, and it's a pleasure to be connected with you. And we'll link down also your new book down in the description for people to stay connected with you. I also just want to open the floor for any last thoughts you have around anything that you maybe feel like we haven't covered, also where people can stay connected with you towards the end. But is there anything else that you'd like to share?
So the one thought that it's been haunting me personally is, saying yes is a start, and continuing to say yes, but what am I saying yes to? What am I saying? Am I saying yes to me? Am I giving myself blanket permission to do anything I want? Or how can I best be of service to all creatures in this planet, to the forest, to the and it's a big unknown. Some days I wake up with crystal clear clarity, and some days I'm just going, this is just too confusing. I have no idea what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So it's a befuddling, bewildering time, and I really want to encourage our viewers to stick with it, because it's going to get more interesting. It's not going to get calmer or less bewildering. It's going to get more interesting. And we need each other. We need to be in community with each other. We're not doing this alone. This is not personal enlightenment. Maybe there'll be some of that as well, but this is a pivotal, amazing time for humanity, for all life forms in the earth. That's never occurred. Wow, what a privilege to be alive for that. And it's perfectly natural and normal to be totally confused. Stay with that too. Honor that.
Yeah, that's, I think, a really awesome note to end on too, because returning that sort of compassion back into our own journey, whether it's the highs, the lows, the times where it's yeses, the times where it's nos, and we're confused or we have clarity, it's all included on the path.
Somebody asked me the other day, well, what happens after you transcend yourself, the lower S self or the big S self? I said, well, the first thing you need to do is get rid of the S, You're left with elf, which are these magical creatures from Northern Europe, the elves, Want to get over yourself? Drop the S and step into your magic and to the ancestral magic. Yeah.
One last note I want to ask is, just because it was provoked, is as you do that, you start to gain access to what were once latent faculties and gifts that come online, both in your ability to share, communicate, serve, but then also faculties in terms of like becoming a multisensory human being.
This is gnosis. Mm-hmm. Gnosis is not just knowing intellectually. It's acquiring these superpowers. I did a translation of the original book on shamanism, which are the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Beautiful book. Did a shamanic version of that. And they have a whole section dedicated to the powers and faculties that are awakened as a result of you being committed to be part of a co-creative process. Extraordinary powers, abilities beyond your wildest dreams. And part of it means that you need to begin to go back to your dreaming, the dreaming we do while we sleep. And I'm going to share a dreaming technique, because in your dreams, you're not so bonded to the biological. Your consciousness can and expand. If you take a small glass of water, not this big, but a small glass, and hold it and instruct your body mind that when I wake up, I'm gonna drink half of this glass now, and when I wake up, I'll drink the other half, and my dreams will come back to me. And then you drink half, a small amount, and then in the morning you wake up and drink the other half, and you find after a week or two that your dreams will begin to come back. And then the next step is to do the same practice, but drink the other half of the glass inside a dream. So you look for that glass of water and you find it and you drink and you wake up inside the dream. You're lucid dreaming. And then the third step is that when you are having a business lunch or meeting with friends and they serve water in a restaurant, that sip of water that you have, you wake up inside this dream.
Layers upon layers in reality. Yeah. That's a powerful practice, and also water being the perfect vessel for that catalyst.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there any other thoughts you have on the importance of recalling and decoding our dream world?
I think that we're being spoken to and guided by the invisible world right now through these times. But we need to be able to recall our dreams or learn deep meditation practice so we can do it in a waking state. So much easier to do it in your dreams. And we have luminous beings, ancient shamans, Buddhas that are training us from the invisible world because we don't have much time. We have a decade maybe, or two, to create a new human.
What a ride.
Yeah, what a ride.
It's a fun time to be alive.
Yeah, it's a great time. I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
Alberto, thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much, Andre.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Truly, truly an honor to have you here. Anywhere else you'd like to point people in terms of social media website?
Yeah, we have, my website is the4winds.com, and we have a shamanic monastery that we run in Chile, which I can send you information
Sweet.
on. It's called Los Lobos, the Wolves Sanctuary.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, come visit us sometime.
I would love to.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
I'd love to have you.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on this journey of knowing yourself. And let us know in which ways this episode and the conversation today evokes something within you, and maybe a gnosis. And until next time, be well.